What's up, guys? So I keep saying I'm going to read more of Rufus, Raine, and the American Witch, and I keep forgetting. And well, next week I'm going to be traveling, so I don't know how much time I'll have to read it. So I'm going to read a few chapters right now. So yeah, that's what we're doing. So let's just get right to it, and you guys can just follow along. I'm just going to read it on my phone right here in bed because I don't want to go get my laptop. So for those of you who don't remember, in the last chapter. Death Eaters kind of stormed the castle, chased him out. Um, Professor Raine noticed that Monroe was using dark magic, thought it was kind of sketchy, shady, whatever, decided to sneak into McGonagall's office, stole her file, looked at it, found out that she got kicked out of Ilvermorny for using blood magic, and yada yada yada. Now he's suspicious. And so this next chapter is called Halloween. So it says, this was Halloween. It was Halloween. And almost everyone at breakfast was wearing a costume. Today I sat at the Hufflepuff table due to some Slytherins complaining about Violet's tendencies to sit with us. "Where's your costume, Bonnie?" asked Violet with a mouthful of oatmeal. I was supposed to be dressed as a Dementor, as we had made the costume a few days prior when Violet found out I had not prepared one. It was a nice costume, but I didn't want to wear it to class. I preferred to only be in costume at the Hufflepuff Halloween party I was going to that night. Violet was dressed as Beetlejuice, who she explained to me was a Muggle theater character. Her face was covered in green and white makeup, and she wore a messy green wig. I could barely look at her in the eye without bursting into laughter. Most of the Gryffindors dressed up as Harry Potter, how typical. Even the professors were dressed up. Darling dressed as Belle from Beauty and the Beast, and Pine was dressed as Beast. Oak was wearing a dragon costume and kept blocking his eyes. That kept blocking his eyes, so he was walking into walls. All day. Okay. Oak was wearing a dragon costume that kept blocking his eyes, so he was walking into walls all day, which Raine found hilarious. Professor Raine was dressed as Jack Skellington. As a pureblood, I didn't know much about Muggle culture, so Violet had been tutoring me about all things Muggle. She explained movie references, Muggle humor, and musical theater. My schedule today wasn't too bad. I had 2 hours of Defense Against the Dark Arts, then Transfiguration, a free hour, and then Astronomy. Today, in Defense Against the Dark Arts, we were learning about nonverbal spells. I was doing well in this class, but was unable to cast a Patronus charm. I had happy memories, but they were all corrupted, when I was kicked out of my home and expelled from my old school. All my happy memories included either my parents, Ilvermorny, or Shelby, who still hadn't replied to the letters I had sent her. Those memories that were once so happy and joyful were now depressing and painful. Every time I tried to cast a Patronus, I couldn't even make a non-corporeal one. I tried using my memory of winning the Quidditch match, but it wasn't powerful enough. My only other option is to start making happy memories. And that's going to start tonight at the Hufflepuff Halloween party. Transfiguration class today started off fine until Professor Raine gave us back our test results. The test was about human transfiguration in animagi. I had studied the test and was confident that I had received at least an E, or exceeds expectations, but was horrified to see that I had gotten a D. Dreadful. My first failing grade of the year. It didn't seem right. I compared my answers with a Ravenclaw who got an O, outstanding, and our answers were completely identical. Professor Raine must have failed me on purpose. That bastard. After class was over, I went to talk with him. Maybe it was a mistake, or maybe he wrote down the wrong grade. "Excuse me, Professor," I said politely. He didn't even bother to look up from his book as he replied, "What is it, Monroe?" "Can't you see I'm busy?" I took a deep breath and tried to remain calm, and I said, "I believe there may be a mistake with my grade. I got a D, but my answers were identical to John, He cut me off rudely. "Are you confessing to cheating on an exam from John?" he said, looking me in the eye with a raised eyebrow. "No, sir. I compared answers with him after we received the grades," I corrected him. He was standing up now, leaning with his hands on his desk, and he said, "Are you questioning my capability to grade a basic transfiguration test?" In a cocky tone. I didn't understand what he was trying to do. I knew I deserved a passing grade, and he probably knew this too. I started to get angry, but before I could speak, he said, "I hear transfiguration isn't the only subject you're having trouble with. Pine says you can't even perform a non-corporal Patronus, and Professor Whittle says your runes have been of low quality." He was mocking me. It wasn't any of his business what classes I was struggling in. He didn't teach those subjects. He taught transfiguration, a subject that had nothing to do with Patronuses and runes. He could see I was beginning to get furious. Now, don't lose your temper. "I was only saying this because I'd like to offer you personal tutoring," he said. This came as a shock to me. He purposely failed me just so he could offer me help. Something didn't seem right about the whole situation. Was he trying to spend time with me? He must have some sort of ulterior motive behind this, I thought to myself. Nevertheless, I was truly struggling with ancient runes and defense against the dark arts. Maybe some tutoring wouldn't hurt. He looked at me expectantly, awaiting my answer. I didn't see any harm in getting extra help, so I agreed. He told me that our tutoring sessions would be every Tuesday and Thursday after dinner. The rest of the day went on smoothly, apart from astronomy, which was extra boring today. Finally, it was time to get ready for the Halloween party. I went to my dorm and put on my Dementor costume. It got some weird looks from my roommates who were dressed in very revealing or sexy Halloween costumes. Violet welcomed me into the Hufflepuff common room and showed me around. It was much different than the Slytherin common room. It was more light. There was more light. It was warmer, and the interior was decorated with yellow and black banners. According to Violet, it was Hufflepuff tradition to tell scary stories and socialize in the common room, and then raid the kitchens for sweets after curfew. Most of the teachers were at Sir Nicholas's Death Day party, and the rest didn't suspect the Hufflepuffs to be breaking rules, so they never got caught. I was the only Slytherin there, but there were a few Gryffindors at the party, and one of them was the Gryffindor Quidditch team captain, Alexander Spinnet, who seemed to flirt with every girl within a 5-foot radius. He was overconfident, always talking about how Gryffindor is going to beat all the houses and win the Quidditch Cup. If he thinks they're going to beat Slytherin, he is terribly wrong. Once the clock showed 10 p.m., the Hufflepuff common room had been emptied completely, and we were all in the kitchens eating snacks and telling jokes. Alexander and I had been sharing a plate of cookies while debating about which professor is the most uptight. There's no way in hell that Pine is more strict than Gwendolyn. She once gave a kid detention just for sneezing too many times, argued Alexander. I laughed at the thought, some poor kid being ill and showing up to class anyway only to get detention for sneezing. Well, Pine once gave someone detention just for asking too many questions, I said. What? But it's a class. We're supposed to ask questions, he replied, and then laughed. We talked about our favorite professors. We both preferred Professor Oak over the other professors. We had a nice conversation full of laughter when I noticed Violet glaring at me. It was a disturbing look because she was dressed as Beetlejuice, and her green wig was lopsided, but I could see she was pissed about something. She gestured with her head that she wanted to talk outside the kitchen, so I excused myself from the conversation and followed her. "What are you doing talking to Spinnet? He's a player, and I don't mean Quidditch," she yelled in a hushed tone. "It's not like I slept with the guy. We were just talking, Vi," I told her. She didn't believe me. She crossed her arms angrily, rolled her eyes. "What, is he like your ex or something?" I asked. Suddenly, her look of anger changed, and she looked as if she was about to cry. I wanted to say something, but she turned and ran off. I really didn't understand what the problem was. I shrugged it off and started walking towards the Slytherin common room. It was 1 a.m., and I wanted to get in bed. As I was walking down the hallway, I saw Professor Raine exiting the room where the Death Day party was at. He was dressed in a long black coat and a buttoned shirt, and I couldn't help but think of how handsome he looked, and of the other night we had shared together. He looked frustrated, and tears had ran down his face. Part of me wanted to comfort him, and the other part of me wanted to see him suffer for failing me on purpose. Then I realized what time it was, and that if did see me, I'd be in trouble. So I quickly turned the corner and took the long route to the common room. By the time I had got to the common room, it was 1:30 a.m. I had taken the long route and also got lost twice on those damn staircases. I took a shower, put on my pajamas, and got into bed. Tonight's memory might just be good enough for the Patronus charm. Maybe except for the ending, I thought, as I fell asleep. The next one I think is Halloween, Raine's point of view, so I guess we can read that real quick. If I could get to the next one. Maybe not. Might be in the next. There it goes. Okay. Here we go. Professor Raine's point of view. My plan worked. I was able to make Monroe agree to private tutoring. The more time she spends in class, the less time she'll have to use dark magic. And I could try and see if she exhibits signs of dark magic usage. The look on her face when she saw her failing grade was absolutely priceless. I had 2 more classes to teach before lunch, 7th years and 3rd years. The 7th years wouldn't stop talking to each other throughout the whole lesson and ended up giving 3 students detention and taking away a total of 80 points, house points. I couldn't blame them for their excitement. After all, it was Halloween, but talking during class isn't allowed, no exceptions. The 3rd years managed to screw up one of the most simple transfiguration spells ever. Instead of turning their goblets into rabbits, many students either blew up the goblets or created a goblet-rabbit hybrid. Luckily, no animals were harmed in the process. At lunch, I sat next to Professor Darling, who was finally sitting alone. I tried to engage in conversation, but she seemed distracted and didn't want to talk much. A few minutes passed until Pine walked into the dining hall and sat on the other side of Darling, and suddenly she was all smiling and talkative. It disgusted me to see the way she looked at him with pure adoration. Pine was a good man, but he wasn't really worthy of Darling's love. They proceeded to talk about Sir Nicholas's death day party that was happening tonight. Will you be going? Pine asked Darling expectantly. Wouldn't miss an opportunity to dance. Of course I'll be there, she replied with a smile. Will you be there? She questioned Pine. I wouldn't miss the opportunity to dance with you. I'll be there, he responded in a flirty tone. That was that is not a Professor Raine voice. Or Professor Pine voice. I don't have a good Pine voice. Anyway. Or any kind of... I'm just going to keep going. The whole conversation was vomit-inducing. I finished eating at the table and left. They could at least spare us teachers from hearing their disgusting flirting. I had some time to myself, so I went for a walk around the castle. Hogwarts has beautiful sights within its grounds. The Black Lake, the Whomping Willow. My personal favorite has always been the wooden bridge. The view from it was beautiful as ever. I stood there remembering my time at Hogwarts and all the memories. I remember having my first kiss on the bridge during my 4th year, and also remember it being almost completely destroyed during the Battle of Hogwarts, and seeing several of my friends die defending the castle. The memories of the war still haunt me to this day. I was in my 7th year when the battle happened. Death Eaters penetrated the castle and chaos ensued. Many students were evacuated, but I decided to stay and fight. Hogwarts was my home, and I had to protect it. I remember the fire and the explosions, the smell of burning flesh in the air. I can still see the image of Fenrir Greyback ripping Lavender Brown to pieces with his teeth. A Death Eater had killed my best friend that day. I was running to help him fight the Death Eater, but the Death Eater had already won. That was the first and only time I had ever used the killing curse, and I don't regret it one bit. Jason Cooper, he was only 16 when he died. I'll never forget seeing the lights in his eyes die. Every time I face a boggart, I see Jason being struck by a green light and falling to the ground, his eyes staring but not seeing a thing. The memories still hurt as much as the day they were made, and the nightmares never really left. Contact's drying out. The sun had begun to set, and I headed back into the castle for dinner. I wasn't in the mood to talk to any of the other professors, so I took a plate of food and ate it in my living quarters. I sorted through a pile of letters to distract me from my earlier thoughts. It was mostly just letters from my family checking up on me. My family wasn't very supportive that I had decided to join Hogwarts and work as a teacher. They hated the school for endangering its students, and they generally disliked Dumbledore when he was alive. They wanted to remain a neutral party in the war, so when they received a letter from Umbridge stating that I was participating in Dumbledore's army, they were furious. To this day, they still talk about how being neutral during the war was the best option. In my opinion, neutrality was never the best option. Someone has to fight for what is right, and if people stay neutral, change doesn't happen. It was almost time for Sir Nicholas's death day party. I wore a button-down white shirt and a long black coat with a few pieces of jewelry. The party was the same as every year, music, dancing, and whatnot. I shared a dance with Professor Valentina, who was a better dancer than I expected, and spent most of the night chatting with Professor Corvus about the importance of proper wand care. Sorry. Is that meant to be a joke? Because I thought it was. Anyway. Lawn care. Okay. In the corner of the room, I could see Professor Darling. She was wearing a simple white dress with a floral design on it. Her hair was up. Corvus could see me staring at Darling and admiring her beauty. You should ask her to dance, Rufus, he suggested. I thought for a second before getting up and beginning to walk towards her. She looked towards me and said, Professor, excuse me. I've been trying to grab you all night. Would you give me the pleasure? Yeah, it's supposed to say pleasure. Okay. And put her hand out, gesturing to dance with her. I stopped in my tracks and smiled. She had been looking for me. Maybe she had finally realized that Pine isn't the man she should be with. From behind me, I heard Pine say, Of course. I've been looking for you, too. As he walked to Professor Darling, took her hand and began to dance with her. She wasn't talking to me at all. She was talking to him. I realized. My cheeks turned red in embarrassment, and my eyes stung from the tears forming in them. I quickly exited the room before tears began to fall down my face. No one can ever see me like this, I thought as I wiped my tear-stained face. I heard footsteps from the corridor, but when I looked and turned, it was empty. I walked back to my living quarters, humiliated and heartbroken. I took my wand out and started to cast spells around my room, breaking a bookshelf, a vase, and 3 empty vials. That night, I swore I'd never go to another damn Death Day party ever again. So that is the end of that chapter, and the next one will be tutoring and pineling. So, hope you enjoyed that. I will try to record more of these as I have time available. And yeah, I don't know how to end this. Oh, it's up here. Okay, bye.